Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today? Where we'll be talking about, Root, the board game, as you can tell from the video today. Yesterday was a bit of a precursor where I was more talking about like setting up and like actually teaching the game and that experience. But this time I'll actually be talking about the game from a more critical standpoint, as critical as I can be after playing only one game. I mean, I would save my criticism for later on when I played more, but I don't think it's probably going to be a while since I next play it, so while it's fresh in my memory, let's talk about it. But yeah, this is not going to be me like recreating Root or anything in Animal Crossing. It feels weird to precursor that for a board game, but that's normally what I do for movies and things. But anyway, good evening everyone. Excuse me. Right now in Fawnhollow, it's 11:39 PM on Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. Super late video today, but yeah. So Root the board game, if you don't know, it was a game I was interested in ages ago, forgot about, remembered again, actually bought it and played with a few of my friends who also like board games. And long story short, I think it's a pretty fun game. Like I was actually very excited to play the game, which, as I say, is often quite a rarity for me because I don't tend to be dispirited about things, but my passion tends to be a lot more subdued when I think other people's. But it genuinely was an incredibly fun time. And the thing that makes it, I think, most fun, at least from my first brush with it, is the fact it's asymmetric. It's an asymmetric war game, like war strategy game, essentially, where basically you play as one of 4 different factions, in the base game that is, all vying for control of the woodlands and trying to win. You can either play as Marquise the Cat, who is basically like the industrialist who like swept in through the woodlands, took over everything, and is now building like an industrial zone of sawmills and like workshops and recruiters like in her wake. You can play as the Eerie Dynasty, who are like the monarchs of the woodland forest before the Marquise the Cat came in and swept them all out, who are looking to uphold their tradition and retake the throne. You can play as a Woodland Alliance, sick of like all the warfare which is happening on their home turf, like banding together as civilians and overthrowing both the parties who are there. Or you can be the Wandering Vagabond, who's just kind of there for their own business, wondering how they can best profiteer, I suppose, off the war and the infighting between all of them, you know, making allies and turning on them on the flip side. And really, I think the best way I can sum it up is the greatest thing about Root is the fact that it's asymmetrical and you're basically playing the same game 4 different ways. And that is both a good thing and a bad thing. I think some people look at that and be like, that's a bad thing. It doesn't feel like a proper test of skill in the sense because, you know, we're all measured up against sort of like different, you know, metrics. In the first place, it feels like a certain sense of disconnection, which is totally fair. I can understand that criticism. But on the other hand, I think it's actually incredibly fun. It gives you a lot more strategically things to think about. It basically sort of like expands your options of what you need to do to a ridiculous degree and like how you need to react to things to a crazy amount. Like I played as a vagabond and like the way I interacted with the 3 different factions was all completely different. Like a Marquise Cat, I mean, and I'm sure it's different every single game because that's just the nature of it being asymmetric. It's the same way that games like League of Legends, I think, have really long lasting powers because they have a huge champion pool. The game, despite the fact that you have the same base game, destroy the enemy nexus to win, you have so many different champions and so many different combinations which can arise from that. It keeps the game feeling fresh every single time. Of course, I haven't played Root multiple times, so I don't know really the strength of that statement, but I understand it probably to be quite true. Even in that first game, you can really feel how different things can be. Like in my game, I was playing with Vagabond, as I said, and I was like, how I approached each faction was completely different. I started out pretty friendly with Marquise the Cat because they ended up building like a lot of workshops to craft things, and I could not find a lot of hammers in my Vagabond kit, so I could not craft the things that I needed to make. So it ended up with me assisting the Marquise the Cat in exchange for me giving them good cards, them building them, and then me exchanging the items. So we had like a sort of alliance thing going on. With the Eerie Dynasties, I was a lot more cautious because they started getting very strong very early, and towards the mid and late game, I turned on them and I became hostile to them and started basically trying to sweep through taking care of their bases. And then with the Woodland Alliance was sort of like a hit or miss, you know. We were just like friendly enough to support each other at the time it needs to be, but we weren't quite adversarial, we weren't quite friendly. We were like reasonably neutral with each other, you know, still willing to help each other out when it came to it, but not like, we were more like ships passing in the night, if anything. Sort of like a I won't tell on you if you won't tell on me situation. and it was a really interesting dynamic, because it really made me think about it. And the way that I played with these factions evolved. Like, there's one point where I was like, I need to turn on my ally, the Marquise de Cat, because they could very much possibly win. And there was another point where I was like, I should, maybe I should form a coalition with a Woodland Alliance, so then we can both like try and get a victory together like that. It was crazy. And the asymmetric nature of it just leads to so many different possibilities. And I think what helps Root a lot is the fact that it's all based around the same base mechanics. You're all trying to earn 30 points to win. You all interact with a battle system in relatively similar ways. You all move in relatively similar ways. And you all like interact with cards in a very similar way with like crafting and things like that. It makes it understandable and not incredibly overwhelming. Because as I said before, you only really need to know how to play the base mechanics, you need to know how to play your class, and you need to have a passing understanding of all the other, not classes, factions. And it feels like there's a lot of strategy to it. It feels like as we played, as we got better, we basically got better and better with every single turn, which is good because we were beginners. Like, if we didn't get better with every turn, if there ever was a turn where we didn't get better, then it means we plateaued. It means the skill ceiling is not that high for this game. But like every single turn, I was thinking about my previous turn, and I was just like, oh, maybe I should have done that would have been better. Or like, oh, something like that could have been good. And the stories which come from it are really fantastic. Like I mentioned the story where basically what it came down to was my friend, she won. If she didn't win, I would have won on my turn. If I didn't win on my turn, another friend would have won on his turn. And it was crazy close. It all basically came down to the gap of one turn. And it turns out that, even on retrospection, being like, oh, could I have won? And I actually did have a really good chance to win the game. I just didn't think about it as a strategy at the time. And that's kind of what you want from a strategy game. Like, the depth of a strategy game, I think, is defined kind of by the depth of the strategies thus within it. I know that probably sounds like incredibly like blitheringly obvious to say, but sometimes it's not so blatant. Like, strategy games sort of live or die by the strategy which you can employ in them, and Root seems like it's got that sort of complexity to it, and it just feels like a very sort of tightly crafted game. Like, each of the factions has a distinct sort of like identity without being like shoehorned into it, I suppose. And the way they interact with each other feels very sort of like thought out. Like, the Marquise de Cat is all about sort of like conquest and industrialization. They start out being strong, and it's all about maintaining that lead and that control they have over everything by spreading the industrial sort of like aspect and their reach further and further and further throughout the forest. It feels like you are an army, I suppose, slowly taking over the forest, or trying to frantically keep your hold on it. Everyone's got like painted a target on your back because you're the one like with a finger in everyone's pies, or whatever the saying goes. And the Royal Dynasty feels like a very sort of pragmatic but bound by tradition sort of faction. You have the decrees which you have to fulfill every single turn, and it just gets more ridiculous and ridiculous and ridiculous and ridiculous as it keeps adding to them. It feels very sort of like monastic, very traditional in that sense, being like, of course you had to stick by these because these are like ridiculous traditions in place. Even if it would be better to do something else, you are bound by tradition, and it feels very sort of in flavour of that. And at least some really fantastic moments where my friend who was playing the Erie Dynasties just pulled off the absolutely most insane turn I've ever seen. Granted, only played one game, but it was ridiculous. We were all like, oh, she's probably going to turn more next time. There's no way she can build 3 roosts in one turn. There's no way she can do all these battles and recruits. After we took care of like one of her roosts and like made it very difficult for her to traverse through, and then she somehow almost pulled it off. The only reason that she turmoiled is because she ran out of roosts to build. She built all her roosts. It was crazy. And those moments are sort of just like what you live for, like in these sort of games, where you're like, even if you're on the receiving end of that, you're like, that is insane. And it really like put to the strategies and mechanics of a game. Like, the game is quite attack focused, like attack favored, which really favors you to be aggressive with what you have, get a lead, and don't just idly sit around amassing resources. Put those resources into something, because you have 3 other factions who are coming to look to take those resources away from you and make you lose. If you spend too long dithering around not doing anything, they're just going to run straight past you, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's really, really cool. Yeah, the Woodland Alliance feels really like flavorful as well. They're about spreading sympathy, and then like for the other two factions, them walking into the sympathetic clearings makes it more annoying for them, and now they had to weigh up like the double-edged sword. Okay, going into here is like really good for my turn, but it means I've had to like lose one of my cards, or they draw an extra card. And there was even a point where one of my friends who was playing Marquis de Cat was being like, I really hate this sympathetic cleric, which is perfectly on flavour. Like, of course the industrial like not revolutionaries, the industrial like no, the industrialists will hate the sort of like for the people revolutionaries, which are like revolting against the conditions they're in. It feels so flavorful just to be like, I feel you're like a pesky menace, but I know you're also like a ticking time bomb. At any moment you could just revolutionize that district, and suddenly I'm in a lot of trouble if I build up too many resources there, so I need to take you out. But taking you out makes you go stronger. It's very flavorful how going against the Woodland Alliance builds up more favour towards them, so it's sort of like keeping them in check, but you can't be too direct about it. You have to be very sort of smartly strategic. And the Vagabond feels perfectly in line with just sort of like flittering about, bouncing around, doing whatever you want. You go over here, you like trade here, you annoy this person, you like mess up that person. You really feel like you have no ties to anyone, and people don't trust you in the same sort of sense. Like some people trust you as you build up allyship, but they know also at any point you could just turn on a dime on them and it would just spell disaster. It's really cool. Because it's a sort of like balancing act which is continuously through the game, whereas it's like, oh, this person's getting too far ahead, when everyone sort of like turns on them, and it's like, wait, we've got to watch out on this person, they're now like becoming too far ahead. And it's sort of like, especially in the late game, it becomes a balancing act of like so many people are turns away literally from winning. I need to make sure that I can keep them in check, or making sure I can win, or making sure that me doing this does not allow use up too many of my resources and opens up a path for someone else to swoop in for the victory. It's a really delicate balancing act, and it really was quite engaging to play. And I think one thing I normally touch upon, I suppose, upon these things, but I didn't even touch upon this time, is aesthetically, the game is fantastic. It absolutely nails the cute sort of woodland critter sort of storybook-esque vibe is how I describe it, but with like a darker sort of sinister feel behind it at the same time, and it's so cute and amazing, the actual art style behind it. So props to the illustrator. They really make the I truly agree that the game probably wouldn't have been successful if its art style wasn't absolutely like amazing like this. It was a very fantastic idea to go with it. And the best part is there's so many expansions, I suppose, with the game route, which means that it can constantly be incredibly engaging, because it's like, whoa, there's so many different ways you can play. You played before the base game, you played as every single like faction once, and you rotated around, you played maybe even like twice even. It's like, okay, I'm getting like slightly bored, let's branch out a little bit, just buy the next one. But now there's only 2 more factions, and that just introduces a whole bevy of new like combinations in the game, which just like makes things explode exponentially for the patterns which can form, and hello Audie, the stories which can be told because of that. Is Lily not asleep now, or almost asleep? No, you're just chilling in the corner, I guess. Fine. What other parts of Root did I really like? I think one of the best parts about Root is it is very self-aware that it is a very complicated game, but its tutorialization and its ease of referencing things is fantastic. Like Root, the game itself has, the playmats himself has a whole bevy of information on them, which means that if at any point you're just like, I don't really remember what I need to pay to like revolutionize as the Woodland Alliance, you can see it on your board, it's there. Or if you're just like, wait, how many bird-like actions can I put into my decrees, I suppose, as Eerie Dynasties? Boom, it's there. It's on the playmat. And then, very helpfully, on the inverse, not the inverse, the obverse, sorry, that's the word, side of the playmat, tells you exactly how to set up your faction as well, which just makes it even easier. And then they give you like little cards which basically tell you, hey, this is like a good way to set up your faction to begin with. This is what each of the other factions do as well. And they even have like a tutorial mode where the booklet will play through the first 2 turns for you to introduce you, Julian, to as many of the mechanics as possible, and like give you like the feeling of the actual flow of a game, and everyone can sort of become aware and learn from it at the same time. And that's really a very, very clever idea. And then it's just like from there you can either start again and then play your own game, or you can, you know, continue this one. We chose to, of course, play our own game because I already knew the rules, so I could explain it as we go properly, and it allowed them to have their own, make their own, I suppose, decisions at the same time. And it was really, that was like, they really go above and beyond to try and make it easy to find the information. Like, and they have like 2 different rule books. They have like the one which is like getting started with a game, which gives you the basic introduction to the mechanics and an example showcasing the mechanic in action of throughout a turn. And then they have like the comprehensive rulebook where you can like easily look up each of the factions, where you're just like, oh, you know, does this count as something? And you look it up and you're like, oh, okay, that's how that works with that mechanic. And it's just like, They really put a lot of thought basically into the game, is what I mean. Not through just the balance and the flavour. Well, I'm not sure necessarily how balanced it is, but not just through the flavour, I suppose, and the feel of the game, but really how they can communicate that across. So there's no wonder that it's quite a critically acclaimed game, because honestly, it deserves it. It's really genuinely a great game. I can't stress enough. If you like board games, you should absolutely give it a shot, I think, because I think you would probably love it. It's just really engaging, and it makes me want to play more. To be perfectly honest, like after we finished that first game, I was like, oh, I kind of want to play again. Like I want to try a different faction now and see how that, you know, shakes up. What do I like about that? What I don't like about it. And really, I just like the tactile feel, I suppose, of, you know, messing around with the tokens as well. That really is a very good feeling too. I just had a thought as well. I was like, I could probably actually use these pieces to be like Dungeons and Dragons pieces if I really wanted to as well, which would be fantastic fun. Yeah, the map is double-sided, so you have like the base map where you can play the base game, and you can flip it over to randomized clearings as well if you ever get bored of that. And like, it feels like it's a game which is very modular as well, just through its design. It's very, I'm not going to say easy to make expansions for, but you can see how the expansions work. You know, you create a new faction, and you just decide how they work within the rules of combinations of the other factions. I'm not going to say that's easy to design, because there's so many other factions as well. You've got to make sure that they're always compatible, no matter the combination. And then you can always just release new boards with new connections or new gimmicks or things like that. It just feels very cool. I know there are certainly some negatives of Root, but I think the ones I read about the negatives of Root from like reviews are things which only become apparent like later on after playing the game a lot. Like one of them I read was the fact that it very much feels very not coin flippy towards the end, but like what's a word for like when someone chooses who wins based on their actions? Like you can't win, but you can choose who wins. It's like king making, isn't it? Something like that. Because the game is designed in such a way that basically everyone will achieve victory within a set range of turns, which means it can really come down to just who you decide to turn on in that moment. But to that degree, I find it also has a little bit of a social element, not so much that it's key in the game, but part of it is like being able to portray yourself as not being a threat, and then, you know, being able to find the right moment to sort of like flip that and be like, haha, I was a threat all along, and push forward for the win. It really is quite a cool game. I don't really know what else to say about it. What other things that people didn't like super love about it from reviews? I don't know. Again, my review is going to obviously be incredibly biased. I'm not like a board game reviewer. I've only played so many board games, but all I can really say is I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Root. What can I say? And I do want to play more. But for now, I'm going to round this episode off here because I am tired. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see you again. But for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.